Good evening and welcome to this candidate forum on diversity, equity, and inclusion, sponsored by the Hingham Unity Council. This evening, we will feature candidates from 5 different races: Select Board, Town Clerk, Board of Assessors, Light Board, and Board of Health. We are fortunate to have many of the candidates in person here tonight, and we will also be reading statements from those who are unable to attend. My name is Ness Carenti, and as a board member of the Hingham Unity Council, I would like to provide you with some background on our group. Hingham Unity Council is a nonpartisan, nonprofit group formed to facilitate open, respectful, in-person dialogue about systemic issues that affect human dignity with the goal of creating a more inclusive and welcoming community. We are part of the South Shore Unity Council. We all welcome new members, so please visit our website at hinghamunity.org for upcoming events and more information on ways to get involved. I'd also like to encourage people to attend 2 upcoming events. This Saturday, May 15th at 8:15 p.m., we will be screening the movie 42 in Talbot's Parking Lot A. 42 stars the late Chadwick Boseman and tells the story of Jackie Robinson, the first African-American baseball player to play in Major League Baseball. There are still tickets available to this drive-up showing, so please visit hinghamunity.org if you are interested. This month is Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, and we welcome all of our American Pacific Islander community members to the program tonight. On Thursday, May 27th at 7 p.m., we will be hosting our second Race Talk. Members of the Hingham community will share what it's like to be an AAPI in Hingham. This will be a Zoom presentation and all are welcome. I will now turn this over to Racial Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Steering Committee member Andrew Turner, who has kindly agreed to moderate this event.
Thank you, Ness. My name is Andrew Turner. My wife Jody and I live in Hingham with our 2 wonderful kids, Jack and Dylan, and our rascally but sweet dog, Molly. I am a member of the Hingham Unity Council, and I'm honored to be able to moderate this event. The candidates have been fully apprised of the format and ground rules, and for the benefit of our audience, I'll give a quick overview. For the Select Board, Town Clerk, and Board of Assessors discussions, each candidate will briefly introduce themselves for 2 minutes in ballot order. I will then ask them questions. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer each question. Rebuttals for individual questions will not be allowed. The questions have been prepared in advance by the Hingham Unity Council using significant input from the community. It was really exciting to see the interest and engagement, and we're very grateful for your input. At the end of the Q&A session, I will invite each candidate to make a closing statement in reverse ballot order for 90 seconds. We will have a timekeeper to help keep us on track. Thank you, Tien. If you see the stop sign, candidates, please do your best to finish promptly. Libby Lewecki, a candidate for Town Clerk, was not able to attend this evening because she's in New Mexico for her son's graduation. We were able to film her responses to the questions I will be asking tonight, and we will play a video of that Q&A session at the end of the session for the Town Clerk. Lastly, since we were not able to secure 100% attendance for a Q&A session for Light Board and the Board of Health, I will read statements from 3 of the candidates, and Laura Burns, a candidate for Light Board, will make her statement in person. There will be no Q&A session. We will have a 5-minute break between sessions. Okay, with those logistics out of the way, let's get started. Our first forum is for the Select Board. We will start with the 2-minute opening statements from each candidate. Candidates, please remember to unmute, and then you may begin your opening statement. Joe, we'll start with you.
Great, thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Joe Kelly, and I'm running for the Hingham Select Board. I first want to thank the Hingham Unity Council for putting on this event this evening, and I truly appreciate the opportunity to be here with you all. This has been an exciting campaign with the great opportunity to speak to so many Hingham residents about issues that are important to all of us. We are very lucky to call Hingham our home. The most rewarding part of the campaign has been the opportunity to speak with people about the future of our town. COVID-19 continues to have its effects on our town, and hopefully it's wrapping up and near the end. And after we have plenty of issues that the voters care deeply about: quality of public education, safety of our streets, and our commitment to senior citizens are big things that are going to affect this town coming out of the pandemic. Regardless of where we stand on different policies, everyone believes that there seems to be a punctuated idea that we need this consensus building and a strong select board to come out. There are beliefs that new voices and new ideas should be brought to the forefront as we tackle these issues, and we need to tackle these things together. I often tell people that Hingham's the crown jewel of the South Shore, and I don't say it to be cliche, but I truly believe it. The path forward for Hingham is to maintain our bright future, and I believe that I have the strong ability to bring people together to solve our common problems and work together to build a path forward as we continue to grow the town. And again, my name is Joe Kelly, and thanks for hosting this event tonight.
Great. Thank you, Joe. Next up, we'll welcome Liz to make her opening statement. Liz?
Thank you to the Hingham Unity Council for hosting the candidate forum. I'm Liz Klein. My town experience includes service on the Master Plan Committee, Hingham Downtown Association, Hingham's 375th Anniversary Committee, the Hingham Women's Club, School Council, and the Hingham Education Foundation. As a member of the Master Plan Committee, I have had the honor of working with citizen leaders from organizations such as the School Committee, Board of Appeals, Affordable Housing Trust, and the Board of Health. This experience has given me direct exposure to the issues facing our town, as well as the opportunities we can pursue over the next 10 to 15 years. One of the things I'm most proud of as part of the master plan is that I was directly responsible for adding the diversity, equity, and inclusion recommendations for the town, including establishing a DEI committee and actively recruiting and hiring underrepresented populations to enhance diversity of town employees and volunteers. As executive director of the Hingham Downtown Association, I directly supported the many women-owned businesses in our town. I will continue working to support minority-owned businesses as well as welcoming diverse business owners to Hingham. As a leader in the schools, I have championed the DEI initiatives and will continue the work so that students feel welcome, included, and safe so they can thrive in our district. As a Hingham Education Foundation Board of Trustees member, I was the liaison for the Generation Citizen Grant, a civics program for 8th grade students, so they can actively explore civic issues and their critical role in our democracy, and supported a Colors of the World program for our elementary learners, including crayons, markers, and bandages that create a greater sense of belonging. And finally, an elementary summer acceleration academy, a summer program providing direct instruction in English, language arts, and math, because we have seen deficiencies in learning at every grade level, and the equity gap has widened considerably. It's been a privilege and honor to serve. In all of my roles, I have not just spoken about change, but have executed change. I look forward to earning your vote on or before May 22nd. Thank you.
Thank you, Liz. We'll now invite our last candidate for the Select Board, Michelle, to make her opening statement. Michelle?
Hi, thank you so much for having me here today. This is one of the forums that I was looking the most forward to. So I am interested in becoming a select board member because I care about this town. I care about the people in this town, and I think that we can make some change for good. I am a member of the board of the Hingham Pride Project, and it has been one of the coolest things that I have done in my entire life, which seems interesting because I've done a lot of things in my life. One of the things that I've done is I've been in the military for almost 22 years. I served as a medic on a plane, essentially. So it's an air medical evacuation technician. And our job was to transport wounded soldiers from one point of definitive care to the next. Through the work in that job, I wondered what happens to these people when they try to go home and go back to their lives. They're coming back missing parts or coming back with PTSD. How do they go home? And that was when I quit my job as a restaurant manager, and I went back to school and got a second bachelor's in social work and then a master's in social work. That, on top of my business degree, has really contributed to the success that I have had as a social worker. I'm currently the director of clinical services for VinFin. Our organization serves adults with serious mental illness, And my area covers Quincy down through Plymouth, Cape, and the Islands. And I am primarily responsible for risk mitigation, training staff and crisis prevention and staff safety, and overseeing all of the needs of our clients. I'm also a professor at Fisher College, and I teach social and cultural foundations and crisis management and disaster mental health. All of those things, accompanied by my volunteerism within the community, show that I am a person who puts actions before words, and I'm ready to be a leader for this town.
Wonderful. Thank you, Michelle. So actually, you can stay on camera, or we can bring Michelle back on camera, because the first question is going to be for her, and it deals with the Hingham Master Plan. So here's the question. The draft Hingham Master Plan, currently under consideration, states that in 2035, Hingham will be a place that welcomes racial, cultural, and economic diversity. In visioning sessions done with students at South School in November 2019, they noted, quote, Hingham's lack of diversity. The results from a survey of residents echo these same sentiments. The Master Plan Committee has 3 recommendations to improve this. 1, support the town's 50-plus year commitment to welcoming METCO students and families in the Hingham Public Schools. 2, actively recruiting and hiring underrepresented populations to enhance diversity of town employees and volunteers. And 3, establishing a diversity, equity, and inclusion committee. So Michelle, the question for you and for the other candidates, we'll let you start, is what are your reactions to these recommendations to the Hingham Master Plan, draft Hingham Master Plan? And is there anything you'd change?
Well, so my first reaction as I'm listening to the question, now I'm obviously familiar with the draft master plan and the goals of by 2035, is that 2035, that is so long from now, and it's unacceptable that we're not there today. And so that's my first reaction. But ultimately, no, I think that those suggestions are good. I think that the only thing that I would, maybe not the only thing that I could probably add 100 things, but one of the things that I would add is accountability. And I'm not clear at this point in time, based on some of the situations that I'm aware of happened in town, that we are holding people accountable for their actions. And so when things happen in town that are harmful to others, particularly when it comes to race or LGBTQ plus situations, I don't think that we're doing enough. I think that we need to call it out. We need to be open about it. I think there's a lot of shame that happens when, so if an incident happens at a school, everybody's really freaked out about what might happen, what people might say. But ultimately, not addressing it is a bigger factor than pretending it didn't happen. And that also leads to sort of that telephone game where nobody knows what really happened. Honesty is the best policy in this, and I think that we have to hold people accountable, and we have to provide education to the community that that's what we are going to do.
Wonderful, thank you. I'll invite Liz next. Liz, as a reminder of the question, what are your reactions to the recommendations that I mentioned to the draft Hingham Master Plan? And is there anything you'd change?
Sure, that's a great question. I was on the master plan committee, as I mentioned, and one of my favorite parts of that process was gathering that community input and meeting. I was in the room with the 5th graders at South School, the 5th grade leadership club, as well as middle schoolers. And then we also met with high school students, obviously adults, people that had been from Hingham, people that were new to town, senior citizens, and wanting diversity and realizing the lack of diversity in Hingham was a common theme. So that was really interesting and great to see that transcended all ages and kind of all citizen groups that we interviewed. Obviously, I mentioned I was involved with those 3 recommendations. I stand by those recommendations. I think they are good. Certainly, it's not enough. I think when we're talking about diversity and developing a welcoming and inclusive community, it's both a sprint and a marathon. A sprint meaning there are urgent actions that need to be taken now and things that have to happen over the long haul. It is not one thing gets completed, check the box, we're all set. This is a long process, an iterative process, meaning we need continuous feedback from the community to make adjustments and keep working on it till we get it right. I think one other thing that I would love to see the select board taking an active role in is acknowledging when things are happening in our community. If there are microaggressions or people feeling unsafe, people feeling uncomfortable, inappropriate language being used, that our citizens can look to the select board and they will say, that's not okay. That's not going to be tolerated here. That's not the community we are. So I think that is something that I would like to see.
That's great. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you, Liz. Joe, for you, as a reminder of the question, what are your reactions to the recommendations to the draft master plan? And is there anything you'd change?
So I do like the suggestions that were brought forward. I often think, is 2035 maybe too late? Will South Hingham be built out? Where else will we be able to continue to build the town out? What is the town doing to attract diverse populations? I know with, for example, my employer, the Electricians Union in Boston, we had to go out into the community. We issue an application process every single year, and we couldn't get people of color or Boston residents to fill out the application because they simply didn't know these things were available. So we had to do a ton of PR in the community. I literally walked door to door to door in Dorchester and in parts of impoverished neighborhoods throughout Roxbury and Jamaica Plain to let people know that these opportunities to advance themselves into the workforce were available. They simply aren't aware that these things are available. And we also need to work with our business partners. I had a meeting with a local co-op bank recently that said they really need to focus on making mortgages available to people, and they need to work with these underrepresented groups that don't get access to mortgage lending the way that other groups do. And I think 2035, I think we might be out of buildable lots at that point. Hopefully not, but I think this has to happen immediately. And the attention there needs to be education around it. People don't know what they don't know, and we can't expect them to know that Hingham, Massachusetts is seeking more diversity if we're not going into the community and letting people know, hey, we want you in our neighborhood.
That's great. Thank you, Joe. You can actually stay on. We're going to start with you for this next one as well. This one's about affordable housing. So according to Realtor.com, the median sales price of a home in Hingham was $740,000 in May 2020. And in April 2021, that figure increased to $1.075 million. For many families, these ranges are prohibitively high. As more and more families look to move out of Boston as rents rise there, we are missing the opportunity to create a more diverse community. What steps would you like Hingham to take to address this issue?
I think it's probably the most critical issue in the entire region. It's not only a Hingham issue, it's a South Shore issue. It's a Boston issue, as you mentioned. We need to decide as a town where our moral fabric is. Do we value affordable housing? Do we value workforce housing? Do we value low-income housing? And will we fund it? It's nice to talk about these things, and everybody's for them, but then you have to put your money where your mouth is. And I work with the AFL-CIO. The AFL-CIO has a huge program where they fund at 0 or next to 0% interest low-income housing projects, workforce housing projects, to help towns that maybe don't have the funds to do it or can't get there politically yet to make those things a reality today. And it puts local people to work. And that's the entire goal of that, is to put a diverse workforce into the construction and the development of these projects. As a member of the board of the select board, I would seek to work with developers that shared those goals. We need to, Hingham is just not affordable anymore. And it isn't just Hingham, it's the South Shore. And we need to make sure that we have a diverse population that's able to move in, young families, different people of different socioeconomic circumstances. They have to have an opportunity to be able to move in here too, because that benefits everybody. That's good for the kids that have a lot of means, tons of means, and kids that don't. It's a win-win for everybody. So we need to lead and make sure that these things, and use the tools that are available to us because they're out there.
Thank you, Joe. I'll ask Michelle to join us next. And I'll repeat the question. With respect to affordable housing, what steps would you like Hingham take to address this issue?
Well, so I think that that's a bigger question than just affordable housing. So affordable housing is one particular type of housing. And as we know, we have met the minimum requirement for affordable housing. That's not enough. I think that we always need to continue to push forward. But I think to the other part of your question about the difference in the home values in Hingham. So I mean, I hear the number constantly in every meeting that I'm in, right? But hearing you say that just now makes me think, if I needed to grow into Hingham, that would be out of reach for me as a social worker. And one of the things that happened for me is, so my wife grew up here. She went to Hingham High. And one of the first things I told her when we came here was, oh, I want to live in this town. It's so cool. I love the red, white, and blue down the street. The 4th of July was so great. And it felt like this community from a movie, except for a movie that I probably wouldn't watch because it was no diversity. And I wasn't sure that there were any gay people here. So when I moved here, we thought we might be the only gay people. And when the Hingham Pride Project came around, now almost 2 years ago, I was like, there's other people here, holy cow. And so I think that's one of the things that we need to do is, as we're bringing people of diverse populations, they need to know that this is a place that they want to live. And while we're doing that, we need to create housing opportunities that to increase the market. So houses like mine that are less than half of that amount, that people can raise their families in, and maybe they can grow here. And so I think that's the direction that we need to do. But it's about making sure that this is a place that everybody wants to come and they feel welcome.
That's great. Thank you. Liz, to you, I'll repeat the question. What steps would you like Hingham to take to address this issue being one of affordable housing?
Sure, it's a great question. Obviously, this is a complicated topic, but I think there are a few things. First, just to kind of define affordable housing, you referenced the average home price is not affordable for most people. So in response to that, I would say it's about creating housing diversity and housing choice. Whether that's workforce housing or what we refer to in the master plan as middle housing, meaning not huge houses and not apartments, but small single family houses, so that there is diversity and options there. The second, affordable housing, meaning 40B, and we of course have reached the legal limit. But I don't think that our responsibility to provide affordable housing ends there. I think we have a nice opportunity to be in control of that and work closely with the Affordable Housing Trust to say, where does it make sense? Where are we going to put these homes? And make sure that the town has a responsibility to fund the Affordable Housing Trust and make sure that they have the staff and resources to do their very important work. So one other thing that I just want to mention in terms of the master plan. The master plan is designed to be a vision, a plan, a guidepost for the next 10 to 15 years. It does not mean we do nothing until the year 2035. So I just want to make sure that that's clear. But one piece of legislation that was not completed when we did the master plan was the housing choice bill, which is very significant. And I would hope, and certainly as a member of the select board, make sure that the planning board is tackling that as a top priority.
Great, thank you, Liz. Our next question is about civil service. And I'll invite actually Liz to stay on for the first response to this one. Hingham follows civil service when making personnel decisions for fire and police employees, which, among other things, accords a hiring preference for local residents. How do you think this affects the diversity of these departments? And do you think Hingham should consider leaving civil service?
That's a great question. So civil service, as you mentioned, gives preference to residents. And so there's a kind of a prioritized list of who gets hired. So I do think that affects diversity and hiring. And I would like to work on that. I would consider pursuing leaving that, because I think it's important that our hiring practices are aligned with our vision of the community we want to be in terms of our diversity goals, according to the actions set out in the master plan, and in terms of our goals related to police reform. So as the select board acts as police commissioner, and I think that's a really important responsibility of that board to tackle and to look into, and again, make sure that our values are aligned with our hiring practices.
Thank you, Liz. Joe, I'll invite you next. How do you think civil service affects the diversity of the fire and police departments? And do you think Hingham should consider leaving civil service?
I think the civil service is an important tool for us to be able to hire and work people through the chain of being a town employee. I think that if diversity is being diminished because of the distance in which people can live to the town of Hingham, then that's something that we should look at. But I will point out that people in Boston are within that distance, and people that the civil service allows. And the real issue is that, Boston firefighters, you're gonna go where you're gonna make the most money. I mean, nobody that grows up in Dorchester wants to be a Hingham firefighter because they grew up in Dorchester. They want to be a Boston firefighter. They want to work in their own community, and they want to make the most money they can for that profession that they're going to take on. And I don't think eliminating the civil service is going to have any effect at all, because people are always going to go where the money is. I have plenty of friends that work for the city of Boston now, and they don't live in the city of Boston. In fact, there are Boston police officers and firefighters that live here in Hingham, and they could become Hingham firefighters and police officers much more easily, but we don't pay what the city of Boston does. We don't pay what the city of Quincy does, so we'll never get kids from Quincy that will want to be Hingham police or firefighters, Hingham police or firefighters here. And that's going to be really the issue. It's not civil service, it's the amount of money we pay our public servants.
Great, thank you, Joe. Michelle, you're the last respondent here. I'll repeat the question. How do you think civil service affects the diversity of the police and fire departments? And do you think Hingham should consider leaving civil service?
Well, I mean, let's just call it what it is, right? So if you are hiring people who are local, you're going to get white people, right? Because that's the majority of the people that live here, and the percentage of people of color in this community and the surrounding communities is minimal. And so you have options. You can leave civil service because it holds you to that. You can provide education to the very small percentage of people of color in the community, saying, hey, do you want to be a cop here? Do you want to be a firefighter here? But the better solution is to hire in a system that does not restrict people, right? So we're also talking about a civil service exam. And so if you've read anything about diversity and equity, is that testing is biased, and it's biased towards cis white people. And so there are lots of things that are impacted by us using the civil service exam. That, and as we promote people throughout both departments, we don't look outside of the community. That was just evidenced by hiring of the current police chief. He's great. I'm glad that he got hired, but we didn't look outside. We hired within, and that was it. And that restricts our choices. And it also doesn't give us the opportunity to compare candidates. And so I think if there is something that is restrictive, we need to look at what's different. And I think one of the things that people want to just go slow in taking on these things. I've seen this quote multiple times, but like, how long do we need to wait? We need to do this now. We need to make a change now, and we need to provide opportunities for people today.
Thanks, Michelle.
No problem.
Very good. We're going to go on to a question about schools, and I'll invite Joe to start this one. There's been an impassioned debate this year about school funding. In fact, there are yard signs all over town that say, "Fully fund Hingham schools." Can you share, Joe, one or two metrics that you think are salient in this debate and how they inform your position on funding our schools?
Well, so the pandemic has certainly laid out a ton of issues with funding and equity in funding. And I have, 5 children. My youngest daughter will graduate with the class of 2039. So I'm looking forward to seeing those plans come through that were mentioned earlier. There are, the town of Hingham prioritizes some things, doesn't prioritize other things. And we really need to make sure, that our public education system is top notch. If we take stock in any of the Newsweek stuff or any of those rating systems, which I don't entirely, but we see our numbers kind of slipping a little bit, and we need to make sure that high level of public education is always available. It's what draws people to the town of Hingham. It's why people live here. It's why people want to live here. It's one thing that people are proud of, to say their children and grandchildren graduated from Hingham High School. So anything that we can do to increase the level of education here in Hingham should be dealt with first and foremost. And, and I would look to take direction from the school committee. I mean, we have very talented people on the school committee that are volunteering their time. They have institutional knowledge, and we should take their direction and work with them to make things available to the town. They've laid out an incredible budget this time, and I'm glad to see that the town was able to fulfill their requests and get the funding that the school committee requested. Thanks. Sorry.
Great. We'll leave it there. Thanks, Joe. Michelle, you're next. I'll repeat the question. With respect to schools, can you share one or two metrics that you think are salient in this debate about school funding and how they inform your position on funding our schools?
Yeah, so I think over the course of this school budget debate, there were lots of things that were thrown out. Per pupil spending was one, and then the town would say, "Oh no, wait, but we also, we pay for the benefits, so that doesn't count in per pupil spending." And so those sorts of things, I think, so that's the first thing, is that the data that we report is the data that we report. So if we're looking at per pupil spending and we're less than everyone else, all of our lovely benchmark communities, then it's not good enough. And when we look at the types of teachers that we have, my nieces are both in STEM programs down in their Florida schools. We don't do a good enough job of it. STEM programs are huge as far as creating job opportunities for people when they move on, when they graduate from school. And it also, if they are in successful STEM programs, they don't necessarily have to go to colleges, which we know are exorbitantly expensive. I just paid off my student loans. Congratulations to me. So that being said, I think one of the things that needs to happen is the tone from the select board needs to change. The way that we approach the school budget now is that the school says, hey, here's all of the things we need to provide everything we possibly can for our students. And then they are tasked with slashing those things off one by one. There goes a counselor, there goes an art teacher, there goes a music teacher. And we need to stop doing that, because every time we slash, we're not fully funding the schools. And for me, that is the biggest factor. And so then we present this budget that is fully funded, but it's not, because we didn't get everything that we asked for, because we took a bunch of things off from the beginning. And so that is, I think, what we need to address is fully funding schools means providing all of the services that our students need so they can be successful.
Thank you, Michelle. Liz, to you now, last respondent here, I'll repeat the question. Can you share one or two metrics that you think are salient in the debate about school funding and how they inform your position on funding our schools?
Yes, it's a great question. Certainly, this was a debated topic. I think because we're so passionate about education and certainly so passionate about our children and taking care of our children, especially during this very, very difficult year. So you heard, many data points, per pupil spend, a student-teacher ratio, and I think those are all important to look at. They tell part of the story. But to answer you specifically, the two salient points that I think are most meaningful to me are when we look at a grade level and every grade level, and every student is going, or the majority, shouldn't say every, the majority of students are going down and every grade level, that's a big problem. We have cohorts of students that aren't getting what they need and they're not they're not thriving, they're barely staying afloat. They're not succeeding. That's a major issue. When I hear of the number of students in special education that have to go out of district because they're not getting services, that's a major concern. So, all of it tells the story that we need to do better. One of the reasons I'm running is to improve the working relationship between the select board and the school committee. I am passionate about education. I know this community values education, and that needs to come loud and clear from the select board through supporting the school committee and the school board in their strategic planning process, and then supporting them in the budget, whatever is required to support that strategy.
Great. Thank you, Liz. We'll go into our next question. Michelle, we're going to start with you on this one. It is about the environment. So at town meeting this past weekend, voters agreed to a warrant article to establish a climate action planning committee, Article 14, that would develop a climate action plan to recommend a strategy and series of actions to facilitate a town-wide, quote, net zero sum of carbon emissions produced and removed from the atmosphere by 2040. What are some of the specific policies you'd like to see included in this plan?
Well, I think one of those came up at town meeting as we are talking about the public safety building, and then whether we are going to hold them accountable to being net zero. And so there was a lot of debate, obviously, around, well, if we are saying we want a climate action plan, then we should also hold them accountable to being net zero. And I think it's interesting that people had to come forward and say, hey, why are we not doing this at town meeting? And then that wasn't thought of before. And so I think that is the primary thing that we need to do. As we're moving forward with all of these capital projects, they have to be focused on climate change. There is not an option. We can't consider it. It has to be, because otherwise we're working against ourselves, and that just doesn't make any sense. So I think that's the primary thing that we need to do, is as we embark on all of these capital projects, really focusing on not only how can they be net zero, but like what education can they provide around the reasons that they are doing this sort of thing. And so additionally, and there's been a lot of conversation on all of the different climate change Facebook and Instagram and sustainability page of the different things that the people in this town can do to reduce some of our impact on the town. I'm a huge fan of composting. Over the summer, we compost on our own, and in the wintertime, we use a company because obviously frozen compost is no good. But really promoting that composting, because then that's going to reduce not only the wait times at the dump, the amount of garbage that goes to the dump. I did see some signs at the transfer station this past weekend that said that they're promoting composting. So I think it's that sort of thing, is the education that we are providing to the town about the impact that each individual can have on climate change is really important.
Great, thank you, Michelle. Liz, I'll ask you to go next. With respect to the climate action plan, what are some of the specific policies you'd like to see included in this plan?
Thank you. I think it's very important that we have a climate action plan. I was fully supportive of that warrant article and happy to see that passed, creating the committee as well as the plan. I have reviewed the Concord's climate action plan, and they are a similar community to us in a lot of ways, including they have their own municipal light plant. So I think there's a lot of opportunities to learn from communities around us, and think about utilities, infrastructure, certainly our new building projects, and we have a lot of capital projects on the table. So Foster School, the public safety building, building out the senior center, and future development, that all needs to be considered. So I think it's, there's the municipal side as well as the personal resident and citizen side, and educating citizens so they understand what their role is in this, and how we work together as a community, both with town buildings, town departments, as well as with people's own homes, to achieve this great goal.
Great, thanks, Liz. Joe, you're last up. I'll repeat the question for you. With respect to the climate action plan, what are some of the specific policies you'd like to see included in this plan?
Well, I will say I serve on the Public Safety Building Committee. I would love to see that to have strong climate goals, whether that be LEED certified, whether that be entirely net zero. I actually started a group of labor environmentalists who would work together to start to make sure that some of these environmental projects weren't stalled because labor stalled them or environmentalists stalled good projects, so that we could continue to move forward. Because my goal in anything that I do is to bring, you don't have to look very far with the compressor station, but you can see disagreement there. But we can find things where we agree, and we can build things. Air monitoring stations would be one place we would all agree, but things that the town could do immediately is make sure that we tighten up our building code. When I renovated my house, I put in closed cell insulation. I have a gas-fired furnace that I will be able to transition into electric, but I get a notification from the gas company saying I'm using 40% less gas than the most efficient neighbor. That's because I bought the windows and I bought the insulation. It cost a little bit more money in the beginning, but I can see the savings every month when I open my bill. I would love to see the town put electric car charging stations in to incentivize and give premium parking to the electric cars like they do in Boston, right? Hey, you get to park, everybody wants to park up front, everyone wants to park in front of the restaurant, like put the car charging station there. Make these things available. We own the electric company. It should be pretty easy to do. We'll put some people to work and it'll be good for everybody. So why aren't we doing these things? Another big environmental effort that I think we need to take on immediately, Massachusetts gets a D for lead in the water. And it's one thing that nobody ever talks about. We really need to take a look at our water lines. And hey, we own the water company now too. Maybe it's time to take a look at all of these things. It's not just about electricity. It's about, the environment as a whole.
Thanks, Joe. Okay, we have our last question. We're going to start with Liz on this one. It's about Hingham's public statement of support for communities. And I'll read the beginning of the question to Liz. This question is also based on a question we received from a member of the Linden Ponds community. And if they're watching this evening, welcome. We're glad to have you. In October 2017, the Hingham Select Board issued a, quote, welcoming statement proclamation, end quote, stating that, quote, Hingham respects the human rights and dignity of everyone we encounter, regardless of their race, age, religion, country of origin, gender identity, sexual orientation, or physical and mental abilities, and we are a welcoming community, end quote. It further stated that, quote, to that end, we encourage all residents to seek assistance from all resources available to the community, including services provided by our police and fire departments, our recreation commission, and our schools, end quote. My question for you, Liz, and the other candidates is, do you feel this commitment is adequate, or is it time to revisit it?
Good question. I think it's probably adequate in terms of a statement, but now we have to do the work and make sure that we're following through on all of that, and that people really feel welcome, included, and that they are receiving the services to all of the things that you said, rec commission, police, fire, education. I think there's a lot of work to still be done to realize that very nice statement. So I think, it's looking at universal design in future buildings, meaning accessible to children, elderly, people with disabilities. That's an approach that we should use going forward. It's looking at our town buildings, making sure they're accessible, making sure people feel welcome. Town meeting, we saw that Commission on Disabilities did a lot of work to make people feel welcome and comfortable. And I think there's more work to be done there so that people can participate in town government, town activities, and feel like they are a valued part of the community. So yes, I think it's a great statement, but there's a lot of work to put that in practice on a daily basis.
Thanks, Liz. Joe, I'll ask you next. I won't reread it, but do you feel the public statement of support is adequate, or is it time to revisit it?
I mean, we can always do better, right? I mean, I think it's a step in the right direction. I think we absolutely need, we have to roll with the times. As we identify issues, we need to be more accommodating, and we need to be more welcoming. I always think back to my kids coming home from South School and Mrs. Eastwood with, and the rest of the school motto is "Be kind to the necessary," and it always hammers home. And we should always be looking to do those things. We should always be welcoming, whether people are here, to buy an ice cream at Nona's, or they just moved into town, or they're moving out of town, right? We should always do whatever we can to take hurdles down for people, not put hurdles up.
Great, thanks, Joe. Michelle, you get the final response to this question. Do you feel the commitment, as I read it, is adequate, or is it time to revisit it?
I think it's always time to revisit it. But I would also say that I think that answer needs to come from people who are in those communities. From what I understand, I don't think that we are following through on that narrative. And because of that, I think that we need to revisit it all the time. I think that every select board meeting, we should be talking about it. I think that every time we engage with the community, we should be talking about it. We cannot let people behave in a manner that is harmful to other people. We need to be accessible at all times. When we talk about accessibility, we luckily, because of COVID and we had to go virtual, we got Zoom meetings with, captions on them. But yet when things come out from the town, they don't always have captions on them. Meeting minutes aren't posted for people who wouldn't be able to maybe engage in the regular meetings. I think that we need to be constantly doing the work. And I think that this question should be asked of the people who are in those marginalized communities and ask them if they think that we are focused on it. Now, I know it's being asked of me, right? So ultimately, no, I think that a statement isn't good enough. A statement is only as good as the actions that are behind it. And I think that we need to be talking about it on a regular basis. And like I mentioned earlier, we need to be accountable, we need to be communicative, and we need to not hide behind our fear that somebody might be mad at us or somebody might sue us. That is not the right response. The right response is to be the driver and the person who's always stepping forward, trying to do the right thing, regardless of what people's opinions are.
Great, thank you, Michelle. Well, folks, we've made it. Those are all the questions, and I very much appreciate y'all being here. As per the rules, we'll now invite folks to make a closing statement of 90 seconds, and we will go in reverse ballot order on this one. And so, Michelle, I'll invite you to start.
All right. Thank you so much for having me here today. Like I said, this was the one that I was looking forward to the most. No offense to the rest of them. Those were all great too. But I think that, this is the Unity Council, and the work that the Unity Council does really speaks to who I am as a human and what I want for this world. My goal in life has always been to affect change, and this running for select board is just one more opportunity for me to affect change in the community. And I recognize that this path that I'm taking is not traditional, and my opponents have listed all of those things that they have done specifically within Hingham that make them think that they are the best candidate. But what I can tell you is that I am a leader, and I am a human who really cares about you. I don't have children right now in the school system, but I care about every single one of my neighbors and friends and every single child who lives in this community. I care about the people, I care about us doing the right thing, and I care about the future of this town because I live here too, and I care about all the people who are here. And so if you want a caring select board member, then I'm the person that you should vote for. Thanks.
Thank you, Michelle. Liz, I'll invite you up next to make a closing statement.
Great, thank you. Thank you again to the Hingham Unity Council for hosting the forum. Thank you to the other candidates. Thank you to everyone who has engaged in this process, submitting questions, participating today, and watching at home. Hingham's success relies on citizens being engaged and stepping forward to serve. I look forward to having a seat at the table, serving on our select board, bringing the perspective of a woman, a parent, a volunteer, and a professional in finance and management. We are at a critical moment in time when much work needs to be done to invest in our schools, creatively engage in responsible development, preserve our financial health, and build a welcoming and inclusive community for all. Throughout my service in town, I have not only demonstrated my strengths of listening, researching, advocating, inspiring, but also getting the work done and making progressive change. While it's important to know how we align on the important issues we discussed today, it's also important that you know my character, my strong work ethic, integrity, honesty, transparency, and commitment to approaching problems from the lens of what is best for Hingham and our vision for what the community we want to be. Again, I respectfully ask for your vote. If you have any questions or feedback, please reach out directly. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Liz. And Joe, we'll finish with you. I invite you to make a closing statement.
Thanks, Andrew, and thanks everybody in the Hingham Unity Council that put this together tonight. Thanks, Liz and Michelle. I just want to say in closing, thank you for everybody for all the hard work that you do. I'm the type of guy that gets in there, rolls his sleeves up, and gets the work done. I'm going to bring a different perspective. I'm a working class guy. I have 5 young children. And, schools are critically important. The values of this town. I grew up in the city of Boston, a very diverse city with a lot of, a lot of things that aren't available here in Hingham as well. And I'd like to see us move towards some of those goals that we have on the other side. I don't have all the answers. I'm looking for you to work with me. I'm looking for us to break down walls that separate our thought processes and for us to work together to solve these goals. I need all of you to come to me with your ideas on how we make things great and how we can work together to make Hingham the best possible place to live here on the South Shore. And I'm asking for your vote on May 22nd. Thank you for the time, and thank you for everyone that worked hard to put this together. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. A big thank you to the candidates for your willingness to participate in this forum. We wish all of you luck in the election, and thank you to our live stream audiences for tuning in. A recording of this forum will be available on the Hingham Unity Council Facebook page and YouTube pages and the Hingham Unity Council website. The election is Saturday, May 22nd. The deadline to register to vote was yesterday, the 12th, so I hope everyone's registered. Thank you again for joining us, and remember to vote on May 22nd. Please also visit the Hingham Unity Council website at hinghamunity.org for more upcoming events, including our screening of the movie 42 this Saturday, May 15th at 8:15 p.m. in Talbot's Parking Lot A, and our second race talk on Thursday, May 27th at 7 p.m., where members of the Hingham community will share what it's like to be an Asian American Pacific Islander in Hingham. We will now take a 5-minute break, and then we will come back for the forum for Town Clerk. And thank you also to Tien and Ness for driving. We are right on time. Thanks, folks. Hey folks, we'll just give it 1 minute and we'll start promptly at 6:35 p.m. Okay, welcome back everyone. For those just joining us, we'll now begin the forum for Town Clerk. As a reminder, each candidate will briefly introduce themselves for up to 2 minutes in ballot order. I will then ask them questions. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer each question. Rebuttals for individual questions will not be allowed. The questions have been prepared in advance by the Hingham Unity Council and with input from the community, so thank you very much for your input. At the end of the Q&A session, I will invite each candidate to make a closing statement in reverse ballot order for 90 seconds. Libby Lewecki, a candidate for Town Clerk, was not able to attend this evening because she's in New Mexico for her son's graduation. We were able to film her responses to the questions I will be asking tonight, and we will play a video of that Q&A session at the end of this session, live session with the candidates. We will start with the 2-minute opening statements from each candidate. Candidates, please remember to unmute, and then you may begin your opening statement. Carol, we'll start with you.
Thank you very much. Thank you to the Hingham Unity Council for supporting this forum. I am Carol Falvey, and I respectfully ask for your vote for Hingham Town Clerk. I am a lifelong Hingham resident and was inspired by the example set by my parents, Bob and Charlotte Falvey, to serve the town. I was elected to the school committee for 2 terms, held leadership roles, and served as the president of Hingham Education Foundation. These experiences provided exposure to the workings of town government. Alongside the select board and the advisory committee, we passed budgets, we ushered in new projects such as the new middle school, the high school fields project, and full-day kindergarten. My 6-year commitment to the Hingham Education Foundation and work with the Hingham Sports Partnership made clear to me the importance of working with different groups to achieve a successful outcome. Because of these municipal and nonprofit experiences, people in town know me and trust me to do the job. As an attorney, I am trained to look at issues and questions from all points of view, essential component for the office. And to that point, I have been an unenrolled voter for decades. I believe elections are the cornerstone of our democracy. In the office of the town clerk, I will maintain and run our elections in a fair and neutral manner. I believe every vote counts. I believe the town clerk's office must continue to be a trusted place, run with integrity and professionalism, treating all who walk through the door with acceptance and dignity. And finally, I believe that my personal and professional experience have prepared me to serve the town as town clerk. I ask that you put your trust in me, and I respectfully ask for your vote on or before May 22nd. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Carol. I'll invite Laura next and want to make sure the candidates have the opportunity to test their audio. So Laura, if you come off mute.
Can you hear me?
We can. Go
All
ahead.
right.
Thank you.
Hang on. Thank you. All right. Thank you, and thanks to the Hingham Unity Council for inviting me to join this important conversation tonight. I'm Laura English Marwill, and I'm running for town clerk. I've made a point of my Hingham roots because I think it's important for Hingham voters to know that I love this town and that my only motivation for seeking this position is to serve the town to the best of my abilities. But I think in this forum, it's appropriate for me to discuss my experiences outside of Hingham. My curiosity about different cultures was sparked by the students from France and Japan that lived in our house when we were growing up. I spent a summer during high school in Madrid, Spain, and my junior year of college immersed in Hispanic culture while living and studying in Salamanca, Spain. During my senior year, when other kids were heading off to sandy beaches, I spent winter break traveling around the USSR with a group of students. In fact, we bumped into Barbara Walters at the Kremlin, and I bet I'm the only candidate who can say that. So while my roots are deep here in Hingham, I have lived and traveled abroad and embraced peoples of all different cultures and beliefs. For graduation, I was given a framed quote by Mark Twain, which I display in my home still. It says, "Travel is fatal to prejudice, bigotry, and narrow-mindedness, and many of our people need it sorely on these accounts." I believe inclusion should be a core community value, and that all people should demonstrate respect and tolerance for one another and the traditions and values of groups within our community. I believe this takes a whole town approach, and as town clerk, I will support policies and programs reflective of a welcoming and inclusive community. I look forward to the conversation tonight and discussing how, if I am Hingham's next town clerk, I can help achieve this important goal. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Let me say one other thing that I forgot to admit, folks, and please forgive me. We do have a timekeeper. Tiana is keeping us on time. Thank you very much. And so when you see the stop sign, if you see the stop sign, please do your best to finish promptly. With that, I'll invite Tom to make an opening statement, and also make sure you have a chance to check your audio as well, Tom. Can't hear you yet. We can't hear you, but it sounds like you can hear us. Yeah, actually, try that again.
Okay. So I'm now on my laptop as opposed to here, but so I guess I can get rid of these. So, okay, so I am Tom Patch. I am a town clerk candidate. I am fortunate to say I am a born and raised Hinghamite. I have deep roots in the family, starting with my great grandparents who were Irish immigrants who came to Hingham, started a farm in the mid-1800s. My dad, Fletcher Patch, was a Navy veteran and worked his way up from being a call firefighter to the fire chief. My son Neil is a graduate of Boston College and Harvard and is currently online manager at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. I'm a product of the Hingham Public Schools, and I went to college at the University of Maine, where I played lacrosse, and National University of Galway, Ireland. I earned a bachelor's degree in economics and political science with a focus on public administration. From there, I went to law school, and after law school, went to work for Fleet Financial Group, and subsequently transitioned there to a law firm, and where my practice was focused on municipal law as well as municipal law as well as special town council work for the town of Kingston. I have worked many elections in the town, and under a variety of situations, several years, I've worked directly for town clerk McCracken in her office, and so I have that unique experience. So with that, I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Tom. We can hear you, so we're good there. We'll start our first question and answer session with Laura. I'll invite Laura onto the screen. I will read the full question and then repeat it for each folk, just the question part for each of you in advance. So here's the first one. The draft Hingham Master Plan states that, quote, in 2035, Hingham will be a place that welcomes racial, cultural, and economic diversity. And one of the recommendations in the report is to, quote, actively recruit and hire underrepresented populations to enhance diversity of town employees and volunteers, unquote. The town clerk is often the first person residents and visitors meet when going to town hall or calling the town for help. What will you do as town clerk to actively recruit underrepresented populations to be volunteers in town?
Thank you for the question. The town clerk, when we think of town clerk, the volunteers that she or he mostly has to do with their job are the election workers, and there's about a staff between 40 and 45 of those. There's actually a residency requirement, so the volunteer workforce generally reflects the composition of the community. So as you mentioned that the community composition changes over time, we would expect that the composition of the volunteer staff would also reflect the community. Because of residency requirements and the election workers, a way to accelerate that would be to have specific groups within the community to overrepresent perhaps in volunteering. We have a town talent bank application. You just saw it in the back of town meeting. You can go online and you can click on it and you can be a volunteer. I know that the appointing authorities are always looking for new volunteers to staff the many positions that open up on the boards and committees and other positions in town. So that is, aside from making everybody feel warm and welcome when they come to our community, I would encourage people to fill out the talent bank form and to volunteer for these positions so that they can be represented among the volunteer force.
Great. Thank you, Laura. Tom, I'll welcome you up next, and I'll repeat the question. What would you do as town clerk to actively recruit underrepresented populations to be volunteers in town?
I guess the question is in the town clerk's office, but in general in the town. So within the town clerk's office, you just have to be really careful because there is sensitive information in there that can't just be released to the public. Birth certificates and things like that. So from that point of view, you kind of really, the opportunities are somewhat limited because of the types of records you have and with that. As far as encouraging people as town clerk, the town clerk has to be Switzerland, basically, and as essentially neutral. The town already has a process. Laura's mentioned the talent bank, where the board of selectmen get in and and the moderator who make all these appointments. They basically go through a vetting process. As far as the elections go, one of the problems with the elections is that it really isn't up to the town clerk who works as poll workers. That's all set out by statute. And again, if you want to be able to participate in that way, you really have to essentially reach out to essentially the Democrat and Republican committees because they refer a list of names to the selectmen, and then selectmen end up picking and choosing out of that. So from the town clerk's point of view, as much as you want to help people volunteer, I think the opportunities are relatively limited. What I would like to do is I would like to try to have some kind of yearly forum where we can try to get people qualified and up to speed on being a poll worker, so maybe that gives them a heads up.
That's great. Thank you, Tom. Carol, I'll invite you. The question is, what will you do as town clerk to actively recruit underrepresented populations to be volunteers in town?
Thanks, Andrew. Of course, that's a complicated question, right? Because I think sitting in on the previous discussion with the select board, the people that live here, it depends on housing, and it's just a complicated question for who represents the town. But certainly there are many steps that we could take. First of all, just to start off with the premise that the Board of Selectmen and the moderator do most of the appointing of volunteers in town, but the town clerk's office sort of is a heart of town hall, and they do have the opportunity to meet people and try to encourage them or cajole them to get involved. Certainly for myself, I would try to partner with the League of Women Voters, to the new Hingham Civic Association, and with your Hingham Unity Council, because you have more expertise perhaps than myself, and I'm always open to getting suggestions from people that have more knowledge than I do. So I would definitely partner on social media to try to reach out to people, to let them know about the opportunities, but also maybe on a yearly basis to have this put on the agenda for the Board of Selectmen, so people are aware that they actually do appoint people to serve as election volunteers. Both the Democratic and Republican parties nominate people, but over half the people in Hingham are unregistered, which means for people that don't know, they're not registered in either the Democrat or Republican Party. So we should have representation of the unenrolled people as well as volunteers, because that's reflective of the community. So I think that's what I have to say on this, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Carol. Okay, we'll move on to the next question. And Tom, I'll invite you to start this one. And here it is. Town meeting was this past weekend. The League of Women Voters of Hingham's website has a graph that shows voter turnout statistics from 2001 through 2017 for both town meeting and regular town elections. Of the total eligible voting population, the highest voter turnout has ever been for town meeting across that 16-year period is estimated to be 11%, and it's been as low as 3%. Does it seem right to you that 11% of the population would be deciding law for 100% of Hingham's residents? And what are one or two specific ideas you have to increase participation in town meeting?
Okay, so just so we're clear on the point, town meeting is not an election. And so we're focusing solely on the town meeting issue. Town meeting is the legislative branch of town government. And any registered voter is eligible to come to town meeting. The problem the town clerk has, as I alluded to previously, the town clerk's Switzerland. You know, the town clerk can't get into, cajoling or whatever, people to whether or not essentially they want to exercise their right to come to town meeting or not. Basically, similar to the right to vote. I mean, basically, the right to vote, courts have said that your right to vote is protected speech from government infringement, and your right to not vote is government protected speech from government infringement. So the town clerk, basically what the town clerk can do, and I digress one point, technically town meeting is the moderator's show. It's not the town clerk's show. Town clerk has a very limited role. Town clerk is there to literally be a clerk and take notes and record the results of the different votes. So I think there's very little legally that the town clerk really can do, and the town clerk really needs to be careful of stepping over a line of trying to give people motivation to do this. It's a difficult question. The bottom line is, I just don't think people are vested enough for whatever reason to come to town meeting and spend the couple hours or a couple of nights to do it. And I just don't see what I, as town clerk, can really do legally in that role to change it.
Okay, thanks, Tom. I'll invite Carol up next. Carol, I'll repeat the question for you. Does it seem right to you that 11% of the population would be deciding law for 100% of Hingham's residents at town meeting? And what are one or two specific ideas you have to increase participation in town meeting?
Thanks, Andrew. No, I don't think it's a question that we struggle with and that we've talked about a lot on our campaign. One of the more recent suggestions that came up as a result of us being in COVID and having our Saturday town meetings is maybe we should think about having town meeting instead of at night after people have been at work and they have to be there till 11 o'clock and then get up for work the next day. Should we consider moving different days? So this is just something I would throw out. I know some older people that I spoke to love the idea because they feel more comfortable driving during daylight instead of late at night. So, I mean, I do think the town clerk can be a conduit for engaging people. And I think we should have a conversation and get people involved in that conversation about when we have town meeting. But I also think we need to talk to groups of people in smaller settings so people's voices aren't lost. And I would love to engage people in neighborhood focus groups and talk about both town meeting attendance and election in general. I've heard from some people that people feel disenfranchised and not heard. So are there things that we as a town can do to help people feel that this is an important thing in their life, that we're spending all this money on our town and you should be part of that decision making. So that is something that I would love to do if I'm elected, to start those conversations with neighborhoods. And Finally, expand our communication methods. And I see my time's almost up, but I would like to use some social media to reach out to people, to reach people where they're at. And if they're on Twitter or if they're on Facebook and that's how they get their information, I'd like to help to meet them at that point and give them important information. Thank you.
Thanks, Carol. Laura, you're last up here. Let me repeat the question for you. Does it seem right to you that 11% of the population would be deciding law for 100% of Hingham's residents? And what are one or two specific ideas you have to increase participation in town meeting?
Thank you for the question. Last but not least, I hope. I actually find this interesting. Tom points out that town elections and town meeting are two different things, but I think we can learn a little bit. There are some similarities. At presidential elections, we have a very high turnout, about 85% or higher. At state elections, we have mid 60s to high 60s. Town elections, we have 15 to 20%. And we see at town meeting, most town meetings, we can be very low. I mean, we can struggle to get a quorum, but if there's a big important issue, we can have 2,000 to 3,000 people. So I think that when people don't come, people who come are people that care. People are very motivated to vote for the president, for the governor. They're a little less interested in the local elections unless there's a great race. We'll have a good turnout this year. So it's awesome to have lots of citizen participation and contested races. So it has always been an issue getting a more representative sample of the town to show up at town meeting and vote on these important issues. I think to Carol's point, we've kind of broken the habit of having it Monday night when a lot of people are tired at the end of the day, or when some people have daycare issues and things like, or childcare issues. So maybe we can investigate whether doing it on a weekend will encourage better turnout. I do think that communication is key. We need to be able to use old and new media to get the information out to the town. They need to be engaged. We need increase volunteerism. The more people volunteering on these boards and committees, the more people care about the issues that are being discussed at town meeting. I just think as town clerk, what I would do, and also let's not forget to mention the Commission on Disabilities made a big difference in just our most recent town meeting by increasing parking spaces, making it accessible. So I would continue that work.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you for staying on time. I appreciate it. I'll actually invite you to stay on the screen for this next question. You'll be you'll go first this time. This question is about managing town elections. Each of you were invited on Allie Donnelly's podcast, the Hingham Cast, recently, to discuss your candidacies and engage in a similar Q&A to the one we're having this evening. One of the topics was the 2020 election. What lessons do you heed from the 2020 election, and how do those lessons apply to elections in Hingham? I think you're on mute, Laura. Sorry. We'll restart the clock, so don't worry.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
No problem.
I was going to say, well, one of the great lessons of it is that the whole country was engaged. We had the largest turnout ever in Massachusetts as well as across the country, and I think that's amazing. It had a lot to do, obviously, with the strong feelings around the candidates, and probably to the mail-in voter. I mean, we're still learning the lessons of the universal mail-in balloting. You'd like to think that people were going to show up anyway. But I think that is a really important lesson where I think we're going to evaluate it and see if that is something that voters like and that will encourage greater voter engagement. As a town clerk, we don't propose voter reform. You know, voters elect their representatives. Their representatives debate and discuss and vote on policy. They make policy, and town clerk executes the policy. But whatever reforms do come down the line from 2020, as a town clerk, I would be concerned with making sure that I had processes in place to maintain election integrity, and that I had resources and personnel to implement them, which just made me think of something. If we go through, as election day goes from being election day to election week or election month, it will require a lot more staffing and resources to maintain the level of integrity that we've been used to And that's something that's just a practical concern that we will all have to, voters will have to decide, if the cost is worth the convenience.
Okay, thank you, Laura. I'll invite Carol up next. Carol, I'll repeat the question for you. What lessons do you heed from the 2020 election, and how do those lessons apply to elections in Hingham?
Thank you. Well, I think we saw that the early voting, both by mail and in person, was very impactful. I think the Secretary of State said after the November elections, more than half the people that voted, 75% of the Commonwealth, voted via early voting. So I think that's an important lesson to take away, that people like that ability, that capability to involve themselves and to not have an excuse for absentee voting. So I think that's an important aspect of this. But I think we also, the other lesson that we've learned is that our elections are more fragile than what we believed. I mean, we're seeing across the country, and I know that's, you're asking about Hingham, but we have to be careful that we have elections are protected, because without the elections, our democracy will fold. So I think it is important for us to, as residents and as voters, to be involved, to keep an eye on things, because without free and fair elections and the right people running those elections, we could all be in real trouble. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. Tom, I'll invite you onto the screen and let me repeat the question for you. What lessons do you heed from the 2020 election, and how do those lessons apply to elections in Hingham?
Okay, so the premise is we're talking about the November 3rd presidential general election, and the clear takeaway from that is people like not voting on the day of the election. So basically, the Secretary of State's figures were, I believe, 47% approximately did mail, 23% did early voting. So you had about 35% do the traditional day of voting. So clearly, there's an appetite for to move away from the traditional day of voting. That, I guess, is a good thing, but as with anything that's new, there's an administrative burden and a cost associated with it. So that's going to be a challenge, how we deal with that. You get funded, we basically get funding from the state and potentially also the federal government in terms of paying for those types of things. But obviously, we don't get the money from the feds in the state only elections or the town only elections. So it's going to be an administrative and budget challenge, but we'll persevere. We'll get through it. We'll figure it out. We'll innovate. So that's the first thing. As far as voter registration was up, voter registration in Hingham went up about 2,000. And I think that has a lot to do with the law in Massachusetts now, where they make it so easy to register with the RMV and so forth. The registration rate of Hingham registration rate of all eligible Hingham voters it's over 99%, so it's extremely high. And I think it's going to be a challenge. Anything new, it's going to be a challenge, but we'll do it. We'll get it done.
Excellent. Thank you, Tom. This is our last question. I'd invite Carol onto the screen to start with this one. And here it is. There are examples across the U.S. in recent years when a local town clerk has felt unable to perform their duty because the state law conflicted with their personal opinions. As a candidate, what can you do or say to assure voters that you plan to uphold all laws and not let your values interfere with the job?
Sure. Well, I guess I'm in the enviable position of agreeing with the state laws that we have in Massachusetts. So I'm a pretty open person, and live and let live. Welcome people to come into town hall. I'm there to help them. I'm there to help them achieve what they're trying to do, whether it's getting a marriage certificate or picking up a death certificate or registering to vote. So I don't see that I'm going to be a conflicted person in that regard. I think that we have to be, as a town, very open and welcoming to people, and accepting of people that don't look like me. You know, I'm a person who's lived in this very different life than I'm sure many other people. And I am learning and talking to people every day. And I feel that I would be in a great position to help people and to support people and welcome people to this community. Thank you.
Thanks, Carol. Tom, I'll invite you next, and let me repeat the question for you. As a candidate, what can you do or say to assure voters that you plan to uphold all laws and not let your values interfere with the job?
I think it goes to personal integrity. You know, you can make all the assurances you want to people, but the proof ultimately becomes, the proof is in the pudding, so to speak, or one of those phrases. You know, as an attorney, I'm also subject to the rules of the Board of Bar Overseers, even in my personal or other professional lives. So I have actually an additional layer of oversight as to my integrity, anything that would reflect poorly on being an attorney. So unlike someone who's a non-attorney, I actually have this additional level of scrutiny that I actually have to be aware of and comply with. You know, I can't stress enough that this position is a position that has significant legal responsibilities and is consequential in that respect. I will follow the law wherever it leads. I will execute the law. That is the job of the town clerk. It's one of these things where it's unfortunate. I know people, a lot of the answers I give to people on these questions, they don't like hearing it, but it's the truth. It's reality. It's the law. And as much as my personal feelings might disagree with a policy or a particular law or regulation, I don't have a choice. I just have to follow it. And as I say to people, if you don't like the law, if you don't like the regulation, you don't like the policy, go to the people who make those and get it changed. And then I will execute it. Whatever it is, I will do it. I guarantee to people, I will do what I'm legally required to do.
Excellent. Thank you, Tom. So now, folks, as I mentioned, we will invite each of you to make a closing statement of up to 90 seconds.
Hey, Andrew.
Oh, yeah. Hey, Ness.
We need to hear from Laura first.
Oh, right. From Libby.
Laura. Nope, Laura.
Sorry, Laura. I'm sorry, Laura. I have this little thing where I'm keeping a highlighter.
I'm thinking of a funny joke about inclusion, but I'm not going to say it.
It's smudging. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry.
No, no worries at all.
Please let me number one, apologize, and let me repeat the question. This is about the role of town clerk. As a candidate, what can you do or say to assure voters that you plan to uphold all laws and not let your values interfere with the job?
Thank you. Well, first of all, I'll just say it. I plan to uphold all laws and not let my values interfere with the job. And I will tell you that when I volunteered as an election worker in all 4 elections in 2020, I took an oath to fairly and impartially uphold the law as an election worker. And if I am lucky enough to be Hingham's next town clerk, I will take another oath to fairly and impartially execute the duties of the town clerk. And that is what I will do. And as I spoke about earlier, the town clerk's job is to execute the policies that come down from the state legislature. The way to change policy, if somebody doesn't like policy, is through the legislative process. You elect your representatives, you send them to Beacon Hill, they vote, they debate, they deliberate, they vote, and they set the policies down. I execute the policies, the voters make the policies, and my values will never inhibit or change or affect my ability to execute those duties.
Wonderful. Thank you, Laura. My apologies again. Okay, so now I think that we're through the Q&A portion, and I'll invite folks to make a closing statement of up to 90 seconds. And we'll go in reverse ballot order this time. And then we will play the responses from Libby, and then we'll conclude with some closing remarks. So Tom, I'd invite you for a closing statement, please.
Okay, so in closing, I would like to thank the Unity Council for holding this forum, the candidates for their participation, and all of you who are viewing. These forums are a good thing. Town clerk has numerous consequential responsibilities and functions imposed by federal, state laws, regulations, and policies, and as well as town bylaws and regulations. The learning curve is steep, and it's perilous for a person lacking the necessary experience, skill set, and knowledge. This consequential fact is made clear in the town's job description for town clerk, which states, quote, errors can result in monetary loss and legal repercussions. Thus, the choice of the next town clerk is not about a figurehead, a political prize who was able to paint parents as a congeniality contest. It boils down to, in substance, which candidate has the actual, and I emphasize actual experience, skill set, and knowledge directly pertinent to the job to make the transition resulting from town clerk McCracken's retirement as seamlessly successful as possible for those whom the town clerk serves. If I determined there was a more qualified candidate to do this job, not only would I be not running, but further, I'd be supporting and voting for that person. This is why I waited to pull nomination papers. The Hingham Community and Town Clerk McCracken deserve the most qualified candidate to be elected to this job. I respectfully submit, I am that candidate. That is why I'm running. I'm confident I am up to and can meet the challenge, make the Hingham Community and Town Clerk McCracken proud, and ask for your vote in the May 22nd town election. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Laura, I'll ask you next to make a closing statement.
Okay. Let me pull it up. Thank you to the Hingham Unity Council and to our listeners tonight. The world is changing, and diversity, equity, and inclusion are more accepted and welcomed than ever before. But institutions and people change at different rates, and there's work to do to eradicate barriers and promote community awareness and understanding of cultural differences. I'm grateful for the opportunity this forum gave me to examine my thoughts and responsibilities regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion. I believe our government should provide a welcoming environment for all, and Hingham has made steps in that direction with its employment policies, the reactivation of the Commission on Disabilities, and its recent adoption of gender-neutral language. If I become Hingham's next town clerk, I will build on this progress by fostering a welcoming and inclusive community among staff and all who come to the town clerk's office. I will foster civic engagement of all citizens with the goal of increasing underrepresented groups in governance of the town as members of boards and committees and at town meeting. I will work with the Commission on Disabilities to review our current election and town meeting accommodations and continue progress improving accessibility for all Hingham voters. I learned during my travels that sometimes you need to get away from home to truly appreciate home. Hingham is a wonderful town that is changing and evolving to reflect the community as it changes and evolves, and I'm proud to be part of such positive change. I hope you'll support me to become Hingham's next town clerk. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. And I'll invite Carol as our last live candidate to make a closing statement.
Thank you, Andrew. Well, as everybody has heard from the discussion tonight, the town clerk plays a vital role in our local government. And being located in the heart of Town Hall, it has the capacity to support town-wide efforts at listening and learning on the topics we have discussed here tonight. The office, being such a gateway, can offer information and encouragement to potential new volunteers who hopefully will soon be walking in through the front door to get involved in our community. I hope you agree that with my legal and municipal experience and with the values expressed here tonight, the office under my stewardship will continue to be a trusted place, treating all with acceptance and dignity. I respectfully ask for your vote on or before May 22nd. It would be my honor and privilege to serve as the next Hingham town clerk. Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. I want to say thank you to our candidates and invite them to stay on before we finish up this session. Through some technical wizardry, Ness will allow us to now play the same set of questions, an opening statement and a closing statement from Libby, who is out of town. And we wanted to make sure that voters have the opportunity to hear from all of y'all. And this is sort of the best we could do to be able to accommodate that. So Ness, if we can splice in the video now, that would be wonderful.
I'm Libby Lewicki, and I'm running for town clerk because I want to be front and center, welcoming people into town hall and into our community. I want to tell you about 3 life experiences that helped me to determine a career path and become the person I am today, starting with my sophomore year in college when I was questioning my own sexuality. I dated a boy, but when we both got back from our junior year abroad, he was the one who came out of the closet. One's sexuality and gender identity are at once a core aspect of one's personality, and yet at the same time are not at all anyone else's business. I will note that one exciting privilege that comes from being town clerk is the choice to be a justice of the peace and preside over wedding vows. For me, it would be an honor to unite any 2 people in matrimony, and I promise not to cry until after the nuptials. The second formative experience was my junior year abroad in Bogota, Colombia, where I gained a 3-dimensional view of the world. I realized that the United States is not a benevolent democracy extending a helping hand, one with a much more sinister and self-interested motives. When I returned to the United States with a more objective lens, the importance of combating systematic racism, sexism, and homophobia right here at home came into clear focus. As a white woman, I decided I didn't want to climb up the ladder, but rather that I wanted to help others to climb up the ladder and make for a more level playing field, which leads me to my 3rd experience working as a nursing assistant and a counselor for Planned Parenthood in Washington, D.C., which has an extremely diverse population. For 3 years, I fought on the front line of the battle with people of all ages, colors, and sexual identities to control their own bodies. As Hingham Town Clerk, I look forward to serving all of the citizens of Hingham with dignity and compassion, and I will represent Hingham by welcoming all who enter with open arms.
Thank you, Libby. And thank you for being with us here tonight. We just saw from the other candidates, and we'll go through the same questions that I asked them for you here. We have 4 questions total. And let me start with the first one, and I'll read each of them in order and allow you 2 minutes to respond. Here's the first one. The draft Hingham Master Plan states that, quote, in 2035, Hingham will be a place that welcomes racial, cultural, and economic diversity. And one of the recommendations in the report is to, quote, actively recruit and hire underrepresented populations to enhance diversity of town employees and volunteers. The town clerk is often the first person residents and visitors meet when going to town hall or calling the town for help. What will you do as town clerk to actively recruit underrepresented populations to be volunteers in town?
So I want to tell you about 3 different experiences that I've had and show just how I would present myself as town clerk. And one was as PTO president at South Elementary School. I went in with the intention of creating a very welcoming atmosphere and sort of opening the doors to everybody. And I did that with very positive intentions and really trying hard to acknowledge people when they walk in the door and saying, hi, how are you? Who are you? How can I help you? What do you want to do? And, let's work together. And I created the online newsletter, and I wrote that every week, mostly just to thank people and to recruit people. But it was a creative and fun way to engage people. And I did get a lot of positive feedback about that. During people said, thank you for welcoming in and inspiring me to volunteer and also to step up to leadership positions. So there was that. And then also when I was working for Planned Parenthood as a counselor, I was part of a interagency collaborative so that I traveled around the metropolitan Washington area to reach out to hard to reach Spanish speaking clients. So I brought our services to them because they couldn't come to us. And then also as a substitute teacher in the Hingham schools, I worked frequently with students with disabilities, and from the integrated pre-K program all the way up to the students that were still there after graduation until the age of 22. And I know that, they're always looking for places for those students to work and to volunteer. And I would love to collaborate with schools to bring in those students. And I'll jump over backwards to bring people into the building and make them feel comfortable and welcome.
That's great. Thank you. Here's our second question. It's about town meeting and town elections, and we just had town meeting a few days ago. Town meeting was this past weekend. The League of Women Voters of Hingham's website has a graph that shows voter turnout statistics from 2001 through 2017 for both town meeting and regular town elections. Of the total eligible voting population, the highest voter turnout has ever been for town meeting. Across that 16-year period, it is estimated to be 11%, and it's been as low as 3%. Does it seem right to you that 11% of the population would be deciding law for 100% of Hingham's residents? And, depending on your answer to that question, what are one or two specific ideas you have to increase participation in town meetings?
So increasing participation is a huge cultural shift, and it's not just a problem in Hingham, it's a problem across the country. And we need to do everything that we can to encourage people to come out and vote. And I think as town clerk, there's a couple of ways that you can do that. And the first one is just in maintaining the trust in the process. And I don't think there's ever been a problem in Hingham, and I intend to keep it that way. The state law requires that elections are held in the public view, meaning that public observation of the election process is permitted. And so I would welcome observers, and I would set expectations and provide proper training and hold everyone to extremely high standards of conduct, and invite people into the process as also, and just maintain the trust and the integrity so that people know that their vote will be counted. And then secondly, there's an educational aspect that you can provide. And one of the things I'd like to do is to create a welcome packet for newcomers that explains town governments and encourages participation in our activities. And it could explain very clearly how to register to vote and how to vote. And I have a lot of experience in writing different print media, from brochures and newsletters to press releases, et cetera, et cetera. I did a lot of that when I was working for SCM Community Transportation as an administrative services manager. And I also have experience on online social, creating newsletters and websites and things like that.
Excellent. Thank you. Here's our third question. It's about town elections, and it's actually about the Allie Donnelly's podcast. Each of you was invited on Allie Donnelly's podcast, the Hingham Cast, recently, to discuss your candidacies and engage in a similar Q&A to the one that we're having this evening. One of the topics was the 2020 election. What lessons do you heed from the 2020 election? And how do those lessons apply to elections in Hingham?
So the 2020 election shed a big spotlight on the election process and just how important it is to vote and how important it is for those in charge of the voting process to maintain integrity and trust and dot all your I's and cross all your T's. And I know there are a lot of election workers and volunteers in Hingham who know what they're doing. And I would learn as everything I possibly could. And the good thing is we're not going to have another election in Hingham until next year. So there's a long time to learn it. And I would take all of that time to do that while learning all of the other aspects of the job as well. And, I don't think there's ever been a problem in Hingham, and I intend to keep it that way.
Wonderful. Thank you. We have one more question for you tonight. This is about the role of town clerk and your values, your personal values. There are examples across the US in recent years when a local town clerk has felt unable to perform their duty because the state law conflicted with their personal opinions. As a candidate, what can you do or say to assure voters that you plan to uphold all laws and not let your values interfere with the job?
Well, I think that my values do line up with the laws at the moment. It's hard for me to imagine Massachusetts laws presenting something that don't go along with my own values. I've always been proud to say I live and happy to live in Massachusetts because of that. I did have a friend ask me recently what I would do if it was morally against something that, just they was being told to do. And I think I would talk to a lot of people, and I would ask, and I would, maybe I'm right. And maybe we could all work on changing and pushing back, or maybe that won't happen and I can't do it and I would have to resign. It would be a very sad, hard decision to make, but I would have to just talk to a lot of people and I don't know. That's a really, really hard question. I would try to do what I felt was right. And if I couldn't do what I felt was right in the job, then I would resign.
Okay. I'm sure we could talk about that with all of y'all for a long time, but we'll leave it there. I really appreciate you taking the time to both prepare the opening statement as well as then answer some of the questions we had for you tonight. I'll invite you now to make a closing statement for about 1.5 minutes for the voters.
Okay, thank you. I'm running for town clerk because it is a position that speaks to my education, experience, and heart. I have a Master's of Management of Human Services from Brandeis University and experience working in the nonprofit world. In Hingham, I've proven my dedication and leadership skills as a volunteer in prominent roles, including PTO president at South, PTO president at the high school, and my current role on the school committee. I want to use my skills and experience to help the Hingham town government run smoothly and to rebuild a post-pandemic culture that fosters trust and goodwill and strong civic engagement. I want to collaborate with the schools to create civics lessons to help meet the missions of enabling all students to be successful as local and global citizens. As an accomplished fundraiser, I will always be looking for opportunities to raise funds for new projects. And I would like to coordinate efforts with other town organizations, such as the Senior Center, the Commission on Disabilities, and the Hingham Unity Council, and the High School Unity Council that I just learned about last night at my last school committee meeting. They composed a powerful motto, Rise Up, which means to stand up for respect, inclusion, safety, and equity. I am so humbly grateful to all of the people that are supporting me and to all of the organizations that have provided different platforms for the candidates to present ourselves to the public. I am particularly grateful to the Unity Council for fostering the Courageous Conversations series and inspiring me to tell a more complete story of who I am and how I ended up running for Hingham Town Clerk, and humbly asking for your vote. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Libby. And we will now return it back to the regularly scheduled program. I appreciate you being with us tonight.
Thank you, Andrew, and thank you to everybody who's listening.
Okay. Thanks, folks. And thank you, Ness, for managing the technology. I think it's great to be able to hear from all the candidates in this forum. Let me close by saying a big thank you to all of our candidates for your willingness to participate in this forum. We wish all of you the best of luck in the election. And thank you to our live stream audiences for tuning in. A recording of this forum will be available on the Hingham Unity Council Facebook and YouTube pages and the Hingham Unity Council website. The election is Saturday, May 22nd. The deadline to register to vote for this election was yesterday, so I hope everyone's registered. And thank you all again for joining us. And please, everyone, remember to vote on May 22nd. Please, please also visit the Hingham Unity Council website at hinghamunity.org for more upcoming events, including our screening of the movie 42 this Saturday, May 15th at 8:15 p.m. in Talbot's Parking Lot A, and our second race talk on Thursday, May 27th at 7 p.m., where members of the Hingham community will share what it's like to be an Asian American Pacific Islander in Hingham. We will now take a 5-minute break, and then we will commence the forum for the Board of Assessors. Thank you again, folks, for being here.
Thank you all.
Okay, welcome back, everyone. For those of you just joining us, we'll now begin the forum for the Board of Assessors. As a reminder, each candidate will briefly introduce themselves for up to 2 minutes in ballot order. I will then ask them questions. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer each question. Rebuttals for individual questions will not be allowed. The questions have been prepared in advance by the Hingham Unity Council and by input from members of the community. So for those of you that provided input, thank you. At the end of the Q&A session, I will invite each candidate to make a closing statement in reverse ballot order for up to 90 seconds. 2 things that I want to remind folks of. Number 1 is we will have a timekeeper in the right side of the screen that will alert you when there's 30 seconds left. And then if you see the stop sign, please do your best to finish promptly right then. Secondly, because we're sort of rolling with new candidates coming on this evening, if you'd like the opportunity to come on before your opening statement and test your microphone, just to make sure we can hear you, that would be just fine. Okay, so we will now start with the 2-minute opening statements from each candidate. Candidates, please remember to unmute, and if you want, test your audio, and then you may begin your opening statement. And Al, welcome. We will start with you. Make sure you unmute, Al, so we can hear you. Can't hear you yet. Can you find the mute button?
How's that?
Wonderful. You're good. Thank you.
My name is Al Chambers. I live in the Lincoln School Apartments on Central Street. I've been around Hingham a long time. I initially started my career in banking as a Boston banker, and then as years passed, I got into mortgage-backed securities. And then after retirement, I sold real estate for a number of the large firms on the South Shore, both residential and commercial. This is a very good department that you have in the assessing department. You have 3 full-time employees and 2 part-time, and they are excellent, excellent executives. Their accuracy rate has been running at 93% based on comparable sales and values. They are working on 8,000 properties that have to be reviewed on a regular basis here in Hingham. The valuation of those properties is around $7 million. It's a very big job. We supplement that, by the way, with the use of our software programs for highly difficult things to assess, such as Linden Ponds and the Shipyard area and Derby Street shops. So pretty much anyone running for this office looks good because of the quality of the staff we have. How am I doing on time?
You probably have about 15 seconds.
Okay. Anyhow, we are lucky in having staff. I was appointed to the job 4 years ago. I was working as a registrar, and I ran for re-election 3 years ago. I love the job. I like the people in the department, and I think it's a very interesting.
Thank you, Al. Sorry, we're going to have to cut it off there. For those of you that are watching, you can monitor your time on the right side of the screen there. Welcome, Josh. Thank you. Opening statement to you for 2 minutes. Go ahead.
Great. Thank you. Microphone working? All right, great. Good evening. My name is Joshua Ross. I am running for Board of Assessors. My wife, Sarah, and I have lived in Hingham for almost 15 years. We have 2 children, 1 in 10th grade and 1 in 8th grade. I'm a small business owner running my own photography business, as well as a partner and managing sports editor of the Hingham Anchor. Before my time as a photographer and writer, I worked in finance in the entertainment and financial services industries for 15 years. I have been volunteering in Hingham for the better part of the past decade. I am currently the co-president of the Hingham High School PTO and the former president of the middle school PTO. I am also the former chair of the Compressor Station Task Force. I am running for Board of Assessors because this year has shown us how important and intertwined all departments and committees are in our community. Hingham will get through these challenging times when everyone is working together and pulling in the same direction. I have been fortunate enough during my time in leadership roles in town to work with members of the Select Board, Advisory Committee, Public Safety Departments, Public Health, School Committee, School Administration, and with our state elected officials. It's no secret that the financial forecast for Hingham shows some significant deficits in the coming years. It's also no secret that there are some big, much-needed capital projects coming down the pike, such as the new Foster School, new public safety building, senior center, climate action plan, and the master plan recommendations, to name a few. To be clear, the Board of Assessors does not generate revenue. Its role is to make sure properties are equitably assessed and offer relief to our citizens who need it the most. No matter what role I've had in town, I've always brought new ideas and a commitment to do what is best for Hingham. I will continue to do so if elected to the Board of Assessors. I believe we are going to need both to assure we not only keep moving Hingham forward, but we make sure we leave no one behind. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. I'll invite you to stay on the screen and we'll start the general Q&A session with you. So here's the first question. For our forum tonight, there are 3 contests that feature an incumbent and a challenger: the Light Board, the Board of Assessors, and the Board of Health. We'd like to give each candidate a chance to tell voters why they think they are the better candidate. So Josh, you are the challenger in this race. Why do you think you are the better candidate?
So I see we're starting off with the easy questions. I believe I'm the better candidate for this particular position, given my track record over the last, 7, 8, 9 years volunteering in Hingham. I have held a number of leadership roles, facing some challenges in each of those roles, namely more of a publicly won, the compressor station task force, which saw some significant press and some heated opinions on both sides. Role as chair is to listen to all sides, gather the information needed, and to present it to, at that point, the select board who made their recommendations. I have a track record of thinking outside the box, coming up with new and different ideas, solving problems, bringing people together, working with our elected and appointed and non-appointed volunteers. And like I said earlier, to do what is best in the interest of the town and its citizens. And so I think I am in a great position to continue to do those things for this role in the coming years, if so lucky to be elected. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Josh. Al, I'll invite you on now. And I'll repeat the question for you. We have an incumbent and a challenger, and I'd like you to share, like to give you the opportunity, please, to share a little with the voters about your record and why you think they should re-elect you for this position.
I think I should be re-elected because I have quite a bit of experience, especially in real estate, and it runs back for years. The Assessors Department has 2 sides to it. One is its operating people, the professionals who assess the properties. The other side is your elected officials, and that's what I'm running for, is the elected side of the operation. The importance of that is, by the way, I'm a historic buff. It goes back to the Tea Party controversy, where people from Hingham actually went in to the Bark Beaver and threw tea in the harbor. The theory and the determination was no taxation without representation. And the importance of that is held by the elected officials to review the accuracy. Now, we're coming up on some major spending issues, and I would like to address that later.
Sounds great. Thank you, Al. I'll invite you to stay on for the second question, and it has to do with housing value. So here's the question. Do you view the manner in which we assess home values in our town as an equity issue? And if so, can you please explain?
Okay, I'm not sure I understand your question in terms of an equity issue. Could you clarify that for me?
I think what we're trying to get at, and this is, obviously, Josh, this is input for the way you answer the question as well, is there's a process by which the town goes through to assess the value of homes. And I'm wondering if you think that the process and the way in which we do that is equitable, or that there are equity issues with how we think about home valuation. And if you do, to elaborate on that.
I think it is properly done and equitably done. There are some changes coming, however. Our population is aging, and many of our homeowners who bought homes here for $50,000, $60,000 now own $800,000 properties, and the taxes are a real burden for them. We are looking at some new programs which we're in the process of instituting. There always have been assessment issues where we give breaks to people that are elderly or having difficulties financially. Veterans get a break. And there is a new program that we are bringing out and have proposed called the Circuit Breaker Program, where if you have a ton of equity, profitable equity, but limited earnings, we'll take a look at your ability to pay your taxes and make an adjustment there. That, by the way, will be done with the assistance of the selectmen.
Great, thank you, Al. Josh.
You're welcome.
I'll invite you on, Josh, and I'll repeat the question. Do you view the manner in which we assess home values in Hingham as an equity issue? And if so, can you explain?
Sure. So I think there's two ends of this question, right? There is the lower end, which Mr. Chambers just discussed, about folks who bought a home and is now assessed at a higher value. The market is the market. No one determines what the housing market is except for the buyers and sellers, right? There's no elected officials. There's none of that. All that the Board of Assessors can do and the town can do is to create safety nets for those people and those populations to make sure that they can afford to continue to live in Hingham and that they are continue to be a part of our community. I think the other end of it is, looking, there is some discrepancy in the assessments, right? And so what that number is, 93%, 90%, whatever it is, we're looking at between 7,000 and 8,000 units. We're talking 700 to 800 homes that may be off on their assessments. Now, based on some of the research I've done, those tend to be more of the expensive homes in Hingham. So when a homeowner whose average home, I think we've heard tonight is, it's gone from 700, 800, 900, and maybe close to $1 million now. Those homes tend to be close to what the assessed value is and what the sale price is. We get into the $2.5, $3 million, $4 million homes. Those assessments, based upon what the sale price is, tends to be 70, 60, 50% sometimes, what I've seen of what those, this between the sale price and the assessed price in previous years. So I think there's an equity issue on that end. If the median home price is paying close to what the assessed value is, then I think some of the higher end homes should be assessed close to, if not exactly what, the sale price is. So there.
Great. Thank you, Josh. Let's start this third question with Josh. There's only two of you, so we're just going to ping pong back and forth. This is about abatements. So the question is, one of the roles of the Board of Assessors is to rule on abatement requests made by homeowners. An abatement, for our audience, is a reduction in the tax assessed on someone's property for the fiscal year. So Josh, is there anything you would change to the existing process?
So this is where this question puts me at a little bit of disadvantage coming as a challenger, because the abatement process, due to confidentiality, is done in executive session. So my understanding is that the process takes into account all financial and personal situations, as well as looking at things like neighborhood, home quality, that sort of stuff. My understanding is that the abatement process results tend to be very good for Hingham. That doesn't necessarily mean that, it isn't perfect. There's always, I think there's always room to improve on processes and procedures. I'd like to think the folks who really need it are getting their abatements. I also understand that some of the large businesses also ask for abatements just to see if they can get it through, which thankfully I hear doesn't happen. But, I think the big real estate corporations who have a good amount of property in Hingham shouldn't be asking for abatements. So that's about as much as public knowledge on the Hingham abatement process that I can sort of comment on without, anyone violating executive session laws.
To be clear, the Hingham Unity Council does not want to violate any executive orders, so
Right.
we'll leave it at that.
Okay.
Al, let me shape this question then for you about abatements. Can you share with voters how you ensure this is a fair and equitable process, the abatement process?
It's a matter of judgment of your elected assessors. I would say it's quite fair, and it's highly regulated. We look at everything from new appraisals to condition of the property, to the income of the householder, or illness. We don't want to boot people out that have supported Hingham for years and put their children through the schools. I do think that we're sitting on the edge of a hill right now. I saw something last week that surprised me, and I've never seen it before in Hingham, and that was I saw a line of people waiting to go into a Conway listing on Main Street. When things get so good that you think you can't lose money, that's when you make big mistakes, whether it's the stock market or real estate. And I think there has been a tendency for people to overpay for some of the homes in Hingham. Last year, 2020, we had exactly the same dollar amount of residential sales as we did in 2019. And I see my sign is up, and I can't give you the wonderful conclusion.
You have 30 seconds, Al. Go ahead. We give you a warning and then a stop sign. So 30 seconds.
That's what I'm saying. We need to exercise care at this point. This market in Hingham will not go up forever. And what happened was we had the same dollar amount in 2020 and as we did in 2019. However, far fewer houses sold under $1 million and far more houses sold over $1 million, which made up the difference. There is a softening in this market.
Great. I have to leave it there, Al. Thank you. But you can stay with me for the last question. And this one has to do with exemptions. So the Board of Assessors also processes applications for exemptions. Exemptions are available under Massachusetts law to reduce property tax obligations for certain qualifying taxpayers. And a note for our viewers, exemptions are distinguished from abatements in that exemptions are referred to the person, while abatements refer to the property. There are exemptions in place currently for low-income households, elderly households, veterans, and other categories. So my question, Al, to you and eventually to Josh as well is, are there other exemptions you'd like the town of Hingham to consider? And how do you think exemptions contribute to a more inclusive and diverse community?
Well, the new one that we're working on right now is the circuit breaker program, which would provide further assistance. And what we're looking for is excessive assets, believe it or not. If someone's got a $4 million house and their income has dropped to 20 grand a year, they're going to need a circuit breaker. We can always recover the tax base later on the sale of the house. So just to try to help them out, we've proposed the circuit breaker program, which I sent a copy to Josh on and also to the selectmen for their consideration. That's just one step. But the other thing is we actually sometimes have to find people that are afraid to apply for abatements or exemptions. Sometimes they've got to be told. And frequently it's a matter of a widow who has inherited a house from her husband's loss, and she's just struggling to pay the bills. So we seek out people actively to help them out.
Great, thank you, Al. I'll repeat the question, Josh, for you around exemptions. I listed some before, and are there other exemptions you'd like the town of Hingham to consider? And how do you think exemptions contribute to a more inclusive and diverse community?
So I think, you know, one of the things, and I'll circle back a little bit with some of the previous races and some of the questions that you had asked. And I know one of them for the select board was for, you know, when they hire the civil servants, right? The police and fire, you know, how do we bring in a more diverse workforce? I think exemptions for property tax is one of the ways, right? You know, if you're a civil servant, if you know, we do it for the military, if we do it for other serving public safety positions to build out a diverse community, I think that's, you know, we should go for it. You know, looking at, and I've gotten some, you know, conflicting reports on whether or not we can do exemptions on commercial properties. And I don't know if this is going to be a question, or are we done after this on the commercial stuff? But, you know, if we do exemptions and we do circuit breakers on residential properties, then I think we should look at doing things for small businesses compared to, you know, big corporations who also are in town. I've heard some conflicting reports that you can't, and I've heard some things where you can designate a certain part of town as a historic district so that they're sort of grandfathered in. I know there are some legal statutes that preside over this, but I'm open to that, right? You know, we need to take a look at everything in the next few years to figure out how to move things forward and get some of these things that the town not only voted on at town meeting, but have talked about in the master plan. You know, we'll talk about in the school master plan that's coming up this month or next month. Things like the Hingham Unity Council that just, you know, you guys were just created in the last, you know, year or so. And you have some things that you want to do. You know, everyone has things they want to do in town. And I think one of the things we need to do is look at everything, you know, and figure out a way to do it and do it together. So, yeah.
Great. Thank you.
No problem.
Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Al. So we're through the formal Q&A for this evening. I'll now invite each of you to make a closing statement of up to 90 seconds. And this time we'll go in reverse ballot order. So in that case, Josh, you can lead off.
Great. Thank you. I would like to thank the Hingham Unity Council, Mr. Chambers, the other candidates for the other positions tonight, Mr. Moderator, Tien and Ness, who were working behind the scenes and sometimes in front of the camera, and all those who've taken time out of their busy day to watch this forum. I know it's a busy time of year. There's a million things going on. And as a candidate who has done this a few times, I think I can speak on behalf of all the candidates that we truly do appreciate taking time out to watch this live or a tape version. As we've heard throughout the night, Hingham is a great place to live. We all choose to live here for our own reasons. We also have to acknowledge that there are some work that needs to be done across many different areas. The citizens have already identified areas of concern they would like to see addressed through town meeting, budget approvals, and input on the master plan. We all need to work together to reach these goals. If elected, I promise to continue to work with other elected officials and leaders in our community to find solutions and do the hard work needed to continue to move Hingham forward, to make it a welcoming and inviting community for anyone who chooses to call Hingham home. I respectfully ask for your vote on May 22nd for Board of Assessors. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh. Al, I'll invite you on to make a closing statement of up to 90 seconds as well.
Thank you. Josh, if elected, will do a good job. There's no question in my mind. I think what I add to the package at this point is experience. And I think we're facing a couple of tough years in terms of future deficits. So going back to my point on, I think our accuracy in the assessing area has been absolutely fabulous. And mostly, by the way, because of the quality of our staff, but I'll take credit for it. In any case, the only abatement we gave commercially last year was we abated part of Linden Pond's tax bill after a very long threatened court fight. And I was the sole dissenter on that abatement because I think all commercial properties get a great deal in Hingham for the simple reason they're on a uniform tax rate. Large companies come in, pay more in taxes anyhow because they have larger properties. So thank you very much for this opportunity. Best wishes to you all.
Thank you, Al. And let me invite both candidates on so I can thank you both for your willingness to participate in the forum this evening. We wish both of you the best of luck in the election. And thank you to our audiences for tuning into this live stream. A recording of this forum will be available on the Hingham Unity Council Facebook and YouTube pages and the Hingham Unity Council website. The election is Saturday, May 22nd. The deadline to register to vote for this election was yesterday, so I hope everyone is registered. And thank you again for joining us, and please remember to vote on May 22nd. Please also visit the Hingham Unity Council website at hinghamunity.org for more upcoming events, including our screening of the movie 42 this Saturday, May 15th at 8:15 p.m. in Talbot's Parking Lot A, and our second race talk on Thursday, May 27th at 7 p.m., where members of the Hingham community will share what it's like to be an Asian American Pacific Islander in Hingham. We'll now take a 5-minute break and then commence with the statements for 2 contests, Light Board and the Board of Health. Thank you all for tuning in. Welcome back, everyone. For those just joining us, we'll now begin the forums for our last two contests, Light Board and the Board of Health. Since we were not able to secure 100% attendance for a Q&A session for these sessions, I will read statements from 3 of the candidates, and Laura Burns, a candidate for the Light Board, will make her statement in person. There will be no Q&A session. As with the other races, we will proceed in ballot order. We'll begin with the Light Board, and I will read a statement from John Stoddard. Hello, my name is John Stoddard, and I am running for re-election for the Hingham Light Board. I'm a lifelong resident of Hingham and have been a member of the Light Board for the past 20 years. I have my own electrical and contracting business in Hingham in existence for the past 19 years. During my time on the Light Board, I have supported numerous endeavors to make the town's electricity more carbon-free and to make it more affordable for residents to make renewable energy choices of their own. This includes supporting the Clean Energy Bill, which is an effort by the municipal light plants, also known as MLPs, of Massachusetts to match the state's clean energy goals of being net zero by 2050. We have also enacted the LED streetlight program, as well as the MLP solar program. The LED streetlight program allowed the town to adopt energy-efficient LED streetlights, which saves energy and ratepayer money while reducing light pollution throughout Hingham. The MLP solar program let us match HMLP dollars to state dollars and allowed residents access to affordable home solar power to save you and HMLP money. Lastly, I voted to create and support the Hingham Drives Electric program, which informs customers about the savings and benefits that come from choosing an electric vehicle, as well as the incentives for both purchasing and charging that are available to HMLP customers. We continue to provide carbon-free energy, and now nearly 60% of the town's electricity is carbon-free. Hingham Light is invested in serving the people of the town and invites any comments and suggestions from the public at our meetings. The board is consistently working to encourage discussion and employ the people of the town to take an active role in making renewable energy choices, which includes the availability of our home energy audits, which transitioned to virtual audits during the pandemic, and allows the public to evaluate and employ change of their home energy resources. I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the future, and I thank you for your vote. And I am very grateful not to be a candidate because it is hard to do things with the timeline. Thank you, Tien. I would now like to welcome Laura Burns to make her statement. Laura, thank you for being here tonight. Please unmute yourself, and if you'd like to try out your audio, and begin whenever you are ready.
Hi, Andrew. I just wanted to ask, thank you for this opportunity. Are you planning to read the prompt, the question that you asked us to answer in our statement?
I can do that.
That might
help. Thank you. This is the prompt. Thank you for the reminder. This is the prompt that we offered candidates the opportunity to respond to. Hingham Unity Council is a nonpartisan, nonprofit group formed to facilitate open, respectful, in-person dialogue about systemic issues that affect human dignity with the goal of creating a more inclusive and welcoming community. What opportunities do you see as a member of the Light Board to help us advance this mission? Thanks, Laura.
Thanks. I'm running for Light Board because I see enormous changes in the energy landscape coming down the pike as we shift to renewables and say goodbye to fossil fuels. Moving away from fossil fuels means electrifying our heating, cooling, and transportation, a job for the light plant. An enormous societal shift like that always has the potential to create barriers for those less able to manage it due to lack of resources. This is where environmental justice enters the picture. Environmental justice means recognizing that some communities have always shouldered more of the burdens of industrialization, and it means making sure that those same communities don't pay more than their share of costs for the change that's underway in our move towards a more livable world. What does this mean practically on the ground in Hingham? I have always thought the crux of inclusion in our community comes down to housing. Who is able to move to our beautiful town if they want to, and what are the barriers to that? Affordable housing is the main barrier to community diversity in Hingham, in my opinion. Now we find that if we build new housing, we must fit it for the new era. Ideally, we would build new homes heated and powered only by green technology. Does that put it out of the reach for affordability of the average person? And will retrofitting our own homes be affordable for everyone who lives in our community, regardless of their income status? Hingham Light will be at the center of this move to electrification. So I think it belongs at the center of the community discussion of how we get there equitably and affordably. The Light Board has never played a role like this before, but because we're facing a global climate crisis, I think the board should become electrification ambassadors for the entire community. This brings us to the mission of the Unity Council. I'm a founder of Hingham Net Zero, our local climate action group, and we in the Unity Council have already begun planning a discussion on how to build green, affordable housing. I hope we can expand the discussion down the road to include the question, how can we all retrofit our homes affordably? I hope to continue that involvement as a Light Board member, and I ask for your vote to get it done. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. And thank you for the prompt to remind folks of the question. We wish both you and John the best of luck in the election.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our last forum is for the Board of Health, and neither candidate is present tonight, so I will read statements from both candidates in ballot order. We'll start with a statement from Peter Bickford. This year is my 21st serving on the Board of Health. Previously, I was on the Planning Board for 12 years. My 33 years of service to the town qualifies me to continue to serve. 75% of our work at the Board of Health is septic system review and permitting. It is critical that we ensure all permitted systems be environmentally compatible in their function and placement. Repair of failing systems is always a challenge. Until 2020, much of our agenda concerned site plan review. COVID-19 changed that. Our first case was in February 2020. Since then, we have had over 1,800 cases. Because of Susan Sarney, our executive health officer, and the other on the command team, Hingham has never had more than 2 consecutive weeks in the red. Despite the state's program of vaccination distribution, we have vaccinated over 800 people, 27% of our town. The Board of Health constantly works with businesses, sports teams, and schools on contact tracing. After a tumultuous, challenging year, I am asking you to re-elect me to the Board of Health. This board has guided us through the COVID-19 pandemic, kept our strict rules and regulations in compliance regarding site plan review and development. We continue to adjust and upgrade our guidelines to keep Hingham healthy and safe. Thank you. Okay, I will now read a statement from the second candidate, Johanna Burwell. As a member of the Board of Health, I would make it my mission through social media outreach, timely town website updates, community forums, and information sessions to provide the information people need for equitable healthcare in our community. The pandemic has magnified the lack of inclusive, reliable, and easy to understand information that is readily accessible to all residents of Hingham. As a nurse for over 20 years, I have cared for many different people from all walks of life and age. One universal denominator I noticed is our individual and collective need for health promotion, protection, and prevention. A healthy lifestyle is only possible if people are given access to the information and tools they need in an easy to understand and inclusive format. Thank you to answer this question. Please vote for me, Joanna Burwell, for Board of Health. Well, team, that concludes our forum for the evening. Let me again extend a big thank you to all of the candidates for your willingness to participate in this forum. We wish all of you the best of luck in the election. And again, thank you to our live stream audiences for tuning in. As we've mentioned several times, a recording of this forum will be available on the Hingham Unity Council Facebook and YouTube pages and the Hingham Unity Council website. The election is Saturday, May 22nd. I hope everyone is registered to vote. The deadline has passed. Thank you again for joining us, and remember to vote on May 22nd. And I would be remiss if I did not plug one more time 2 events that you should have on your radar. Please visit the Hingham Unity Council website and hinghamunity.org for more upcoming events, including our screening of the movie 42 this Saturday, May 15th at 8:15 p.m. in Talbot's Parking Lot A, and our second race talk on Thursday, May 27th at 7 p.m., where members of the Hingham community will share what it's like to be an Asian American Pacific Islander in Hingham. Have a good evening, good night, goodbye.